Okay, so in order to measure the effects of neurofeedback, or in essence the effects of practicing with a muse, we are using a software called Matb Ii. Matb Ii stands for Multi-Attribute Task Battery, and it is a task battery that has been developed by NASA. It is freely available, has been used in various studies to assess focused attention before. Not only limited to studies that were concerned with focused attention, but it's also been used in vigilance research and particularly often in the aviation domain, as the tasks closely resemble, for example, the tasks that a pilot would have to perform flying an airplane. We will be concentrating on the system monitoring and the tracking tasks, so this will be the two that we will administer to the participants. We will do a total of 5 sessions, as has been talked on the timeline before when we talked about the timeline, and each session will consist of 20 minutes of system monitoring and tracking tasks, which will be performed concurrently. And in the next slide I will go a little bit more into detail about these tasks. Okay, so a little bit more in detail on the different tasks here that we will be using. The system monitoring task is in essence a system monitoring task. Who would have thought, right? There are 2 things to monitor: the lights on top here and the scales on the bottom, 4 scales on the bottom. The idea here is that each light and scale has an abnormal or normal state, and the participant should press the applicable button F1, F2, F3, F4, F5 or F6 on the keyboard if a light or a scale enters an abnormal state. For this light here, for the green light, normal state is green light on, abnormal state would be green light off. For the red light, the normal state is red light off, the abnormal state would be red light on. And for the scales, they fluctuate in a random pattern from an upper limit to a lower limit. Once they go outside of the upper or lower limit, that is considered the scale has entered an abnormal state. Once the participant presses the respective button, the scale or the light goes back to their normal state. Now there is a timeout value on those, and for the lights it is 10 seconds, for the scales it's 15 seconds, meaning that if a light enters an abnormal state and the participant does not respond within 10 seconds, the light will automatically revert to the normal state. For the tracking task is, again, just like the name says, tracking task. And the idea here, or the goal, is to keep the crosshairs centered. And what will happen here is, and this task is done with a joystick, not with a keyboard. What will happen here is that the crosshairs will fluctuate in a random pattern outside of their limits. So the crosshairs will move, for example, something like this, a pattern like that, and the participant needs to move the joystick to bring the crosshairs back to the middle point here, back to the center point. What we measure here as a dependent value is the root mean squared error of the deviation of the crosshairs from the center point. So this is our manual tracking task. And this concludes the introduction of the Matb Ii.